Thank you. Thank you for coming back after the coffee break. I'm hoping that you're finding all the talks really valuable. And what I wanted to do today is actually share with you the journey that our company, Origin Retail, went on over the last 2 years. And I've been listening to the talks by Service New South Wales and by the IAG, and I found that the challenges that they face and the journeys that they had been through are very similar to what we are going through. And I guess I wanted to share it with you and see if some of that resonates with you, and also if you find some lessons that we went through that might be valuable to you. But let me first begin by asking you, how many of you think that the price of Bitcoin is volatile? Hard to predict? How many of you would be willing to agree on a price with me today and lock that price in for the next 2 years, and I can buy that Bitcoin from you at that price that we agree today at any time over the next 2 years? How many would be willing to do that? Probably none. If you look at the price of the wholesale electricity on the energy market, then the price of the Bitcoin is not, or the volatility of the price of Bitcoin is nothing like the volatility of the electricity on the national energy market. And the electricity price can literally jump in minutes from $100, $200 up to $500. It can actually go up to $14,000 in the space of about 5 minutes. It can crash down just as fast, right? And basically what our business is, so the business of the electricity retailer, is to essentially buy the electricity at that price, which is hard to predict, and then sell it at an agreed price, and our contracts generally for 2 years, 1 to 2 years. So our business is a pretty risky business. I don't know how many of you actually understand what your electricity bill is made up of. Before I joined Origin, I didn't really know that more than half of the electricity bill is actually not the price that the retailer actually sets. The majority of that bill, and that information is from ACCC, is made up of the wholesale electricity price, and it's the price at which we buy the electricity from the national energy market. Then there is a huge charge that the distribution, the networks, it's the companies that own poles and wires charge. And the retail margin, or in other words, the part of the price that the retailers actually control, is on average about 16%. And half of that is our costs, and half of that, which is roughly 8%, is a profit. So our margin is not huge, and we don't have that much margin to play with, to compensate for that huge volatility in electricity prices. Before I joined Origin, when I got an electricity bill, I look at I couldn't make sense of it. What are those peak rates, off-peak charges, usage charges? Like, they're really super confusing. And if you try to compare the offerings from one retailer to another retailer, unless you have a PhD in mathematics, it's super hard to do. Right? You basically have to look at, are you using it mostly during the day? Are you mostly using it after the day? And then you got bombarded by the discounts, because for a consumer, to actually make sense and to be able to compare the prices between different providers, you only rely on the discount to make that decision, right? And then all the ads were 30% discount, 36% discount, 40% discount. But discount of what, right? Even that was really hard to compare, because one provider could be discounting 40% of the prices that are that high, and another provider could be discounting of the prices that are this low. And yes, the percentages are different, but what you actually end up paying is very, very different. So it was not good for the customers. It was really, really bad for the customers to be able to compare. And the government then decided to step in, and commissioned the report to restore the electricity prices and restore electricity affordability in Australia, and give Australia a competitive advantage. And as a result of that, what has transpired is that there's been an introduction of what's called the default market offer. In other words, the government has now regulated how much the energy retailers can actually charge, and any advertising that the retailers do can't include the discount. It actually has to be the exact amounts, and they have to be discounting of the same price, not of whatever their current rates are. So you'd have probably noticed that after 1st of July, the ads suddenly changed from 36% discount, 40% discount, whatever it is, to now more of the service, right? And what that actually means to us is in the energy industry, it's a very low engagement category. Customers don't really have brand loyalty. You don't really care whether you get electricity from AGL or from Origin, because the quality of electricity, it's the same. Like the lights are either on or not on. And when the prices are the same, and then the price differentiator kind of goes away. So the only thing that we can really differentiate on is the service and the experience that the customers actually have and they get from us. The problem is a lot of customers are still call us, right? And it's kind of like our customers have been trained because the digital experiences were pretty bad. Because even when the customers actually 18 months ago tried to use our online offerings, the experience was pretty bad, so they end up calling anyway. And the people that did try to use it, couldn't log in, couldn't do some basic stuff. Our digital experiences were really, really broken. And in the old environment where you could offer a discount, it was kind of okay. In the new environment, we needed an amazing digital experience, right? Because where the prices are basically the same between the different providers, the customers will go to the provider that offers them really easy sign-up experience, really easy move experience. For majority of the people, you don't really want to think about your energy. It's a utility, you just want it to be on. It's an admin of life. So we needed an amazing Uber-like experience. The problem with our application was that it was really a monolith. And whenever we needed to ship one new feature, we kind of had to send the entire truck, right? And yes, we did do weekly releases, but each release literally took 5 or 6 people, majority of the day, to actually babysit that release into production. We also had an outage when we were doing the deployment. And yeah, we were doing these weekly releases, but at the cost that was not really sustainable. And where we wanted to get to is move away from that big monolith where we have to ship the entire truck, even if we want to release a single feature, to being more like we wanted to unleash the cars and kind of like let them all go at the same time. And another problem was we were driving blind, right? Every time we would do a deployment, we didn't really know what was going to be broken. Like I can't count the number of times where I would get, I'd get a call and someone from our customer care team would say, hey, we're getting reports that the customers can't log in. I'm like, well, let me try it on my phone. Oh, damn, I can't log in either, so we must have an issue. Right? So we didn't really have any of the observability. We were really driving blind. And everything was breaking down frequently. We were having customers not being able to log in. Customers were not being able to select the plans that we were offering. Customers were not being able to, to process the move. And usually people think about electricity kind of like in 2 situations. When you're moving from one house to another house, or when you get a bill and then you have to pay the bill, right? And if you get online and you decide to pay the bill and you can't pay the bill, it's really frustrating. So we need to get some tools. We got New Relic. New Relic was really good tool that allows us to get that observability. That allowed us to see, especially with synthetics, it allowed us to see what the customers were saying. And it did have an unintended consequence. I remember that when we switched on the synthetics for our login experience, I had our analytics team came to me excitedly and said, hey, you've got this spike in logins, like customers are able to log in. I was like, calm down, it's just the synthetics, right? So we kind of had to filter out the synthetics calls from the analytics. We also hooked it up to Slack, and we were using Slack for all of our team. So we started to get this real-time visibility into what the issues are actually happening. Not that we could fix the issues straight away, but at least we were seeing that they're happening, and we could start to address them. A lot of our systems were not within the control of our team. So we're relying on some, kind of like third-party tools and the third-party providers. But at least we started to have a conversation with them when things were broken. You'd get on a call with them and go, your thing is not working. And they'll go, no, everything looks fine with us. And but the customers can't log in, and I can tell you exactly when the customers started to have that problem and when they stopped having this problem. So at least the conversation started to be different, and we got away from the conversations. Everything works for me. Another thing that we really needed to do is to introduce the culture of ownership. We could not afford to have those conversations on the phone where we have 3 different vendors on the phone and everyone is blaming each other. One vendor is saying, no, CPU looks fine, we're seeing good throughput, everything is fine with us. And then you talk to the networking guys and they go like, no, it looks good. And then you talk to the digital team and you go, yeah, but we're getting customers complaining that they can't log in, and we can see that synthetics are actually failing. So we needed to have this culture of ownership. It's not that someone else owns the problem, you own the problem, I own the problem, and ultimately it comes down to me. And we needed to grow the team. So the team about 2 years ago was pretty small, around sort of 20-ish people. The team was actually split between Sydney and Melbourne, which also was making it a bit difficult because half of the team located in one spot, another team located in another spot. The business was mainly located in Melbourne. So we kind of had to go from that split team, small team, and consolidate it down to Melbourne, and literally increase the team from around 20 people up to about 150 people. And that's in the space of about 12 months. And we couldn't do it with breaking stuff, right? So we needed to set up a new structure. And I'm sure you've heard quite a few companies talked about, like ANZ spoke about it, Afterpay spoke about the concept of tribes and squads. And we also like those companies, we have customer journeys. And those customer journeys are, around choosing your plan or, comparing what plans we have, making a bill payment, seeing what your usage is. So we focused the squads on customer journeys. And then we've combined the squads into tribes, and the tribes also had a focus. So we had a tribe that are focusing on sales, and we had a tribe focusing on service. We also found, and we introduced guilds as well, because with the tribe and squads, one of the really important thing is to still have the practices like DevOps or the front-end engineering still evolving so that the tribes and the squads don't kind of like reinvent the wheel. So we established a tech hub and a UX hub. And the tech hub and the UX hub basically look after the things that are shared across the tribes and the squads, and they're really something that enables the tribes and the squads to go faster. And we had to break up the monolith. So we started to chip away at that. We used what's called the strangler pattern, which basically means that we went journey after journey after journey, and we started to move it away from big monolith onto the microsites and the microservices architecture. And as we were doing that, we automated. So we changed the tech stack as well. So we introduced React, we introduced Node. We still have a lot of Java-based services as well. And we started to automate as much as we can. We also put a lot of effort into automating testing. And not just automating testing at the functional level, but also automating testing at the browser level, at the devices level as well. And we used a couple of tools like BrowserStack and ApplyTools to give us that fast feedback. Whenever we're rolling the changes out, we can actually get fast feedback on when something is broken. And we found it really works really well for us. We've automated all our deployments. We even changed the monolith to be able to deploy in a blue-green deployment kind of manner, so that when we're doing the deployments, we didn't at least impact the customer. We're still impacting the internal customers because we had to take the CMS offline, but at least our external customers were not impacted. And we had this mantra of monitoring everything. So synthetics became it's a mandatory thing. APM became almost like a mandatory thing as well. Browser monitoring became a mandatory thing as well. And we've expanded it to the DevSecOps as well. So we actually have ongoing security testing we use a platform which is a white hat hacking platform called Bugcrowd, and they literally have white hat hackers trying to hack the site all the time. So we have pretty high confidence that our website doesn't actually have any security holes. And we changed and started to release daily, right? And everyone hates the Friday deployments, but to us, the deployments became the norm. Like one Friday, we did, I think, about 35 deployments. And those stats are a couple of months old. I think now on average, we're doing probably 20, 30, sometimes 40 deployments a day. So our speed of change is not limited by how fast the team can actually do it. It's limited by how fast the business can absorb that change. Because some of the changes that we do requires the training of the customer care, may require some help and support articles to be written, may require some comms to the customers as well. So like we can deploy fast, but if the organization or the customers are not ready to accept that change, then that speed is kind of like it's a bit of a wasted effort. We still had a few challenges, and I'm sure a lot of the challenges are similar to regardless of what the industry you're in. After-hours support on being on call. Developers love to deploy into production, right? So DevOps is awesome, DevOps is great, until you start talking to them about carrying a phone and reacting to things after hours, right? And that's been a challenge. Everyone loves to deploy on Friday until about 4:30 p.m. No one wants to deploy after 4:30 p.m. and no one wants to get back from the pub at 7 p.m. because something is broken to fix it, right? No one wants to, fix something that is broken on Saturday morning or Sunday morning. And in an environment where you have a culture of you build it, you fix it, it works well, as long as you're not fixing someone else's stuff, right? And we found that because we use, not everything is within the control of our team. So we do have some backend systems that we rely on. We do have some third-party APIs that we use. Like sometimes we would get the alerts go off, and we can see that the feature is broken, but it's not the stuff that we built, right? But we own it. So we still find in that right model where we still need to have the DevOps model, and we still want to have that culture of ownership. But with a lot of with so much effort that we put into automating testing and deployments, we are finding that the stuff that we write is actually solid, rock solid, and the stuff that breaks is usually not our stuff. So we're now starting to look at, do we have the on-call after-hours support model right, and do we actually need to have a developer to play almost like an incident manager role rather than being, fixing stuff. We also found, we found that as we scaled the tribes and scaled the squads and scaled the teams, and everyone is going at 100 miles an hour, you can't just kind of go, well, everyone just stop until we develop this framework, and then you all guys can use this framework and everything will be great, right? So we're finding that because of the speed of change and how fast we had to go, we were finding that the tribes and the squads might have to do the same thing twice. So we did have some duplication, and it's something that we're starting to address as well. And the third thing that we found is our teams have become really effective and efficient at building stuff, right? But the more stuff you build, the more stuff that you have to look after, right? And it's not just because the stuff is breaking, like the stuff is not breaking, but in a culture of MVP and release one and ongoing enhancements, all those ongoing enhancements start to add up. So the feature that you build, is going to be enhanced continuously, and the second feature that you build going to be enhanced continuously. So we're starting to find over time that the capacity of the team to do really new stuff is really reducing because the time is taken up by enhancing the stuff that we already built. And we haven't necessarily solved that challenge yet, but it's something that we're struggling, starting to look at. I really like that quote from Mark Zuckerberg. It's move fast and break things. And unless you're breaking stuff, you're really not moving fast enough, right? And it sounds really, really good. And can I have a show of hands? If we had a 0.01% error rate, do you think that's acceptable? Do you think it's acceptable? Do you think it's good? Yeah, you would say so. Well, it depends, right? And it depends what you break, right? And we've had to learn what stuff we can break and what stuff we can't break. Because I guess if you look at this news article, 400 customers were affected, and on average were overcharged by $17 over what, 7 years. And out of 4 million customers, you'd say, well, that's all right, that's kind of acceptable. And I think probably worth, it probably costed more to print the article, to write and print the article than to compensate the customers. But we really had to be careful of what stuff we can break and what stuff we can't break. And for example, things like our billing and what we bill the customers is something that we really can't break. But there are things that we can, go through the MVP and release an MVP. You just have to be, ready for some criticism, right? And those are real kind of customer feedback. So when we deployed our Android app and iOS app, we started to get some really bad reviews. And you kind of have to look at it and go, should have we just kind of waited and released the perfect app? And no, we decided to actually move fast and put the app in the hands of the users, because what we then did is we actually have all those feedbacks in real time being published to Slack. And we started to get the feedback from real users on real issues. And it allowed us to actually find some issues that we haven't even thought of. And it also allowed us to prioritize the features much better, because we were getting this real user feedback from real customers so that we can actually deploy those features fast. And our architecture actually allowed us to react to those customer feedback and to react to the features the customers are actually asking for. But yeah, you have to be ready for some criticism, and you kind of can't take it personally. And you'd probably say, awesome, we can deploy it multiple times a day. We've got this awesome architecture. So we're done, mission accomplished. Yeah? Well, not really. And I don't know how many of you know the history of cane toads and how they came to be introduced in Australia. I'll tell you the story. So about 1930s, Australia had a problem. Sugarcane was being eaten by beetles, by cane beetles, right? And they were eating the crops, and the beetles' larvae was actually eating the roots as well, right? So it was a major issue. And they looked at other countries, and they looked at Hawaii and South America, and they saw that toads in South America were actually eating beetles, right? And they were saving the sugarcane, which was awesome. So they decided, yeah, that's a really good thing to do. So let's bring those toads over to Australia. Let's release them into the wild, right? And the toads will eat the cane beetles, and the problem is solved, right? Well, the problem was that toads in Australia didn't really like, Australian beetles. So they didn't eat beetles, right? So it actually didn't help with the cane, the sugar cane, but it created another major issue that we still fight, the Australia is still trying to solve, and that's the cane toads loved the Australian natural life, right? And because they are poisonous as well, they started to actually impact the native Australian wildlife, right? And they started to spread as well. They were released in Queensland, and now they're spread to almost like down to New South Wales, which is like 2,000 kilometers away from they were being released. And the reason I'm telling you this story is we had to find not just the problems to solve, like the customer problems to solve, but we also needed to solve them in the right way, right? And our mission is to get the energy right for the customer community and the planet. And that means that we really need to, we really want to solve the problem for the customers where the energy bills are really high, right? And yeah, you could solve it in one way, but just switching the lights off, and you can sit in the dark and in the cold, but that's probably not the right solution, right? And what we want to do for the customers is we see that in the future, the customer behavior is omni-channel. It's not just the customers are going on the website or going and using our apps. They're going to be also using the phone. They're going to be using Alexas. They're going to be using the devices inside the house. So we really see the future of our customer experience as being omni-channel, right? And that means that in the future, the customer might choose to call us because they got a bill or because they need to move. And through the telephony channel, we might offer them the self-service within the telephony channel, or we might deflect them into the digital channel, or they might actually be using all of them at the same time, right? And where we see the industry is going and where we see the future, I guess, is with the latest government changes and the changes that have happened since 1st of July, the ability of the energy retailers to lower the energy bills by just lowering the prices is somewhat limited, right? And the future for the customers to lower the energy bills is to actually look at their energy consumption and what they actually need to get from the grid, and to make the things within the house or behind the meter work together, right? So it's getting your solar panels that work really well during the day, but don't work that well during the night, working together with the storage where you can actually store some energy that you generate through your solar panel and put it into the battery. You look at your appliances and the time that appliances are running and the energy efficiency of those appliances. And then with the electric vehicles that are starting to be more and more popular, sometimes when you get home and you've got an electric vehicle and you plug it in, you don't necessarily have to charge it straight away, right? Because it might be cheaper for you to charge it in overnight, and between the the hours of 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. actually use the electric vehicle as the battery that produces electricity or stores the energy rather than consumes the energy. So we really see the future of being able to reduce the energy bills by making all those things play together, right? And we see a big opportunity in smart home appliances as well. And basically making all those things kind of play together that will give a lot of benefits from it, to the customer in terms of their energy bills being lower. But it also unlocks quite a lot of possibilities for us to actually provide additional value add back to the customers, right? So for example, if we can provide you as a customer a disaggregated view of what your energy consumption looks like, how much you're consuming on appliances, how much your standby power actually costing you, or how much your other things are costing you, then you can make smarter decisions on what to do with that. And really want to be in a position where we can actually provide you some tips and some recommendations on what to do. But we also see some use cases starting to emerge where the knowledge that we have in terms of your energy consumption, you can use for other aspects of your life. Like, for example, if you have an elderly parent that lives somewhere, and from our usage view, we can see that, let's say your grandma always puts the kettle on around 8 a.m., 7:30 a.m. If we actually can see that the kettle hasn't been put on until, let's say, 9 a.m., we could potentially alert the customer and say, hey, you may want to check up on your grandma because we're not seeing the pattern of behavior that is kind of normal. So we see the role of energy retailer like Origin Energy is really changing from, hey, we'll just supply the electricity to your meter and then you do whatever you want with it, right? We really see an opportunity for us to actually, give you a lot more visibility of what you use and how you should use it. So if I look at it from that was the business kind of opportunity. Now from a tools perspective, the types of tools that we need, like we're using New Relic as an example, and New Relic gives us an awesome view and insights and observability in a web channel and the native apps channel, right? But the next challenge for us is how do we actually get that omni-channel view? Like how do we actually have, if we have a smart IVR platform, and that smart IVR platform relies on some of our digital APIs, right? How can we actually do distributed tracing between the smart IVR platform and the digital APIs, and how do we connect it all together? The types of teams that we will need. And I spoke about the tribes and the squads. And what we want to have is not a tribe of tribes, but a team of teams, right? And we're starting to see in some cases where the concept of tribes or the org structure of tribes actually creates a bit of a silo effect, right? And the teams start to become kind of siloed in their domain, and that's what we're mindful of. And really in the future we see that we need to have a team of teams where there are no silos. Like we shouldn't have developers from a sales tribe saying, it's not my problem, it's a service tribe problem, or it's a tech hub, it's a platform thing, right? We really need to have the teams, interfacing with each other, having the relationship with each other, so that we have a team of teams, not a tribe of, fighting tribes. And for that team of teams, the two things that we really have to get right is the high autonomy and high alignment, right? And right now, if we are not highly aligned, if we give the teams high autonomy, they'll just go off and rebuild everything, from scratch. They might be working on customer journeys that are not really that important from a strategic perspective, or they might be making technology choices that are not really, strategic choices either. If we give the teams low autonomy but high alignment, it's actually not that engaging. It's kind of like hiring smart people and then telling them what to do. So really where we're trying to get to, and that's our sweet spot, is how do we get the teams really super highly aligned so that they know where we're going, both in the technology perspective and the business perspective. And then we can give them the autonomy to actually make the decisions themselves and operate within the guardrails that we leave. So the future is pretty exciting, and we're starting to see it happen now. And we're starting to see the increase of electric vehicles. Tesla has been here for quite some time. Now we see things like Porsche and a lot of other automotive makers actually making, producing the electric vehicles. We see green energy is just exploding. It actually makes it hard for the more traditional energy generators, like the coal power generators, actually to run. But we see it exploding, and it really is the future. We're seeing the rise of smart energy, and what I mean by smart energy is it's things like what's called the demand response, right? So, for example, right now there's an emerging issue that is called a duck curve, right? And what duck curve basically means is in the morning there's really, really high demand on the grid because the solar is not, the sun is not up yet, and the wind might not be blowing. So there's no renewable generation really happening, but there's high demand because people woke up, they put the kettles on, they're doing all the stuff that they need to do. Then during the day, as the renewables kind of come online, we see the demand really, really dropping, and it's dropping to the levels where the price of electricity during the day in some markets like South Australia is actually negative, right? So the solar farms would pay up to $1,000 to get rid of that energy that they're producing because they just can't store it, they don't have the storage. And then around 4 or 5 p.m., the renewables kind of back off because the sun goes down, but people actually get home and they switch all the lights on, so the demand just skyrockets again. And if you kind of look at that demand curve, it does resemble a duck, which is why it's called a duck curve. So the storage will help, right? So the storage will help because the electricity that's generated by solar during the day, we can then store and put it into the storage, and then people can use it, around 4 or 5 p.m. But it's not going to solve everything. Another aspect of that is, or another, I guess, piece of puzzle for that is what's called the demand response, and it's shifting some things and when they run to the time when they should run. So for example, if you have an electric vehicle and you get home, you plug it in at 6 p.m., it does not have to be charging at 6 p.m. because you only need it by the morning, right? So it's shifting the time when things like pool pumps or electric vehicle charging, or even changing the aircon temperature settings a little bit. What that means is it actually reduces the demand during those peak times, and it's shifting that demand into lower demand times, and it's already happening. And we can see there's benefits obviously for the customers because, like you saw before, a big chunk of the electricity bill is the distribution charges. So the higher the rate of that, the higher the demand that's put on the grid, the more money has to be invested in the grid. But if you lower the demand of the grid, then the distributors don't have to invest as much, which means that those savings can actually be passed on to the consumer. So really for finding that all that future is really exciting. We see there's a lot of exciting stuff from a technology perspective with things like IoT and big data and all this predictive next best action type of stuff that we're going to be working on. So really excited. And if you're not an Origin customer, you should become one. So thank you very much. If you want to stay in touch, here's my details.